Most people know that we have 7 geographic regions called continent, but what some might people not know, the smallest continent in the world by land area is Oceania. My name is Aino and today we are going to talk about Australia, Oceania and Antarctica. As we can see, this map shows Australia, Oceania and Antarctica region. To go in depth with this, I'll start with Australia. Australia, often called Australia and Oceania, is the smallest continent in the world. Australia is the only country that is both a country and a continent, and it is also an island. The continent of Australia is surrounded by the Indian Ocean to the west, the Southern Ocean to the south, and the Pacific Ocean to the east. It is found in the southern and eastern hemispheres. Oceania is not a continent, but a continental grouping that includes island countries found in the Pacific Ocean, together with the continent of Australia. In other words, the continent of Australia is part of the grouping called Oceania. You might sometimes hear Australia and the surrounding countries interchange with the name Oceania without mention of Australia as the continent. In accordance with that, we will follow the model of Australia and Oceania, where we mention both of the continent of Australia and the geographic region of Oceania. Now, let's take a look at one of the countries that make up Australia and Oceania. The only country within the mainland continent of Australia is Australia. The 14 countries considered to be part of the geographic region of Oceania are Australia, the country, continent, and the largest island in Oceania. This is also where the city of Sydney is located. Sydney is the largest city in size and in population in Oceania, and where the famous Sydney Opera House is located. Australia is also well known for its Great Barrier Reef, a colorful sea full of tropical fish that you can see even close to the beach. Continuing with the countries in Oceania, we have Fiji, a popular tourist destination because of its beautiful beaches and coral reef. The rest of the countries will be explained by Alia later. Hence, as you can see, Oceania is mostly ocean. Let's move on to Antarctica, the southernmost continent. Located in the southern hemisphere, Antarctica is both the windiest continent and colder place on Earth. It is situated in the polar region, around the South Pole, called the Antarctic region. It is surrounded by the Southern Ocean. Antarctica is twice the size of Australia, yet no one makes Antarctica their home there because it's just too cold. This is why there are no established countries on the continent. The only people who place their feet on this continent are visitors and researchers who stay for a given period of time. Antarctica is known for animals like penguins, seals, and the albatross bird. To further this topic, I'll pass to the next presenter, Adrina.
My name is Nur Adrina and I will be presenting about the climate of this region. This region physical formations range is from a young volcanic island and coral reef to some of the world's oldest landscapes. First is the climatic variation in Australia and New Zealand is different as Australia is dominated by its arid continental interior, while arid is when it's having little or no rain and too dry even to support vegetation. 1/3 of Australia is arid and the other 1/3 is semi-arid. Due of this situation, water shortage are pretty common characteristic of this continent. Typhoons in Western Pacific are frequently happen as the tropical Pacific has a high water temperature for the entire year and it makes it supply moist and heat to the air above that can make an intense tropical storms and typhoons. However, the coastal area of Australia have more regular rainfall and water rains from the Mediterranean climate environment. It is brought by the mid-latitude cyclones of the Southern Ocean. Australia is near with the western end of the oceanic and atmospheric circulation that caused the El Nino fluctuation western Latin America. During 1997 until 1998 El Nino, there were an area stretching from Australia to Oceania suffered an intense drought and forest fire, while Peru had an unusual downpours of rain. Usually, when Peru is dry, the Western Pacific has plentiful rains and vice versa. While New Zealand's climate is mild and humid mid-latitude climate. This climate makes the frequent storms that bring rain to the islands and snow to the high altitude mountains. Also, North Island side is warmer than the South Island. New Zealand's South Island's mountains creates a dry and stable rain shadow zone that provides the irrigation some of the farmland. Second is the tropical ocean climate. Almost all the islands of Oceania are located in tropical latitudes. The wide world of sites of mountainous islands experience an orographic lifting, which is an hilly areas that usually facing oceanic moisture source had causes uplift of air. But for coral atolls, it's lack of sufficient hilly relief to cause the uplift. Did you know that Antarctica landmass is surrounded by the Southern Ocean? Yeah, all of you might know that if you already study, but did you know that historically there are only 4 named oceans, which is the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian and Arctic. However, most countries are now recognize the Southern Atlantic as the 5th ocean since the body of the water extending from the coast of Antarctica to the line of latitude at 60 degrees south. Geological activity. Around hundreds million years ago, Australia, Antarctica, South America, and the peninsula of India is in one continent named Gondwanaland. According to the Wikipedia, the breakup was the result of the eruption the Karoo-Faro-Igneous province. Next is the Great Dividing Range, which is one of the significant mountain chains in Australia. The range running just inland along the continent's east coast. This mountain range also formed rock that were placed from the loss of the ancient continent and were uplifted and broken into blocks by faulting. In Australia, there are also world's largest continuous chain of coral, which is the Great Barrier Reef of the northern coast of that country. Extensive ecosystem. Marsupials such as kangaroos, koalas, wallabies, and possums are Australia's native animals and they are rare in other parts of the world. There is also a unique desert species in the dwarf mallee community. Mallee is form of drought-resistant eucalyptus shrubs that grow into almost impenetrable thickets of many close-spaced stems. Also, some of Australia's plant and animal species occur in the eastern islands that are now part of Indonesia, but now it is separated by the Wallis line from Asian species. This line was drawn by Alfred Russel Wallace in the mid-1800s, and it was over 100 years before the origin of the separation was made clear. New Zealand had a unique temperate rainforest-based flora and fauna before European settlement, and with Antarctica harsh polar climate and permanent ice and snow cover support very little vegetation beyond algae, lichens and mosses. Natural resources for Australia, the rocks that are from the Great Dividing Range are more recent origin and contain coal, silver, lead, zinc, and copper and ores. While in New Zealand, the relief and rainfall combine to make freshwater and hydroelectric power, and some minerals and more substantial deposits of natural gas add to the country's limited natural resources diversity. Next is in Antarctica, believe that they have significant deposit of coal, ores, copper, nickel, silver, and tin are present. The scientific also assert that existence of significant deposit of oil and natural gas. However, due to harsh climate and ice cover, also combined with political treaties restricting resource exploitation, will keep most of the resources in the ground for the next several decades. Environmental problems. Typhoons, floods, drought, earthquake, and volcanic eruptions affect various parts of the region, including this region. In February 2011, a 6.3 magnitude earthquake occurred 6 miles from Christchurch, New Zealand, which is the second largest city in New Zealand. And this situation is considered as the second deadliest natural disaster on record in New Zealand. While in Antarctica, the ice melt from anthropogenic climate change could open the continent for settlement and resources exploration. However, the subsequent sea level rise may submerge the low-lying coastal area around the world. Second is pollution, erosion, and mining. Environmental damage that causes the Australia's landscape to be fragile was made by farmers and miners. In Western Australia, farmers cut down trees that previously helped to balance the water table and to slow the force of the wind near the ground. The resulting in it led to surface salinization and made large areas unusable for farming. Next, New Zealand is known for their strong environmental awareness, but they also facing some soil erosion, air and water pollution issues. Next, I will pass to another presenter.
Thank you, Adrina. Hi, my name is Auni and I will talk about history and culture. The geography of Australia and Oceania shaped and was shaped by indigenous cultures. Europeans arrived late in this region, which is largely located below the equator. Sailors began sailing east from the island of New Guinea around 1500 BCE. Their navigation got more adept as they moved further. Outrigger canoes are enormous, double-hull watercraft constructed by Polynesians. Outrigger canoes could sail across the Pacific rapidly, but they were also easy to steer and paddle in bad weather. Historic Polynesian civilization relied on a sophisticated navigation system based on observations of the stars, ocean swells, and bird flight patterns in addition to outrigger canoes. Polynesians were able to domesticate plants and animals and bring them to islands where there was no native flora or fauna. Polynesians were able to build stable, permanent communities across the South Pacific islands as the result of this. These mariners had colonized Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia by 1000 CE. Australia's and Oceania's indigenous cultures influenced the settings in which they lived. Polynesians, for example, carried agriculture to remote islands when they explored the South Pacific. The Maori, for example, had a major impact on New Zealand's forests and animals. Maori reduced New Zealand's forest cover by nearly half between the 14th and 19th centuries, mostly through controlled fires used to clear land for cultivation. Next, for culture, during this brief span, about 40 bird species became extinct. Habitat destruction, hunting, and competition with invasive species all contributed to the mass extinction. Dogs and rats, for example, are Maori creatures that were introduced to New Zealand's islands. Maori began to throw away half of a bird's weight as unwanted meat or superfluous stuff like feathers, which led to the extinction of the moa around 1400. Indigenous Australians' beliefs and practices were also influenced by the landscape and animals that they lived in. Papua New Guinea's constitution recognized the traditional lands of indigenous peoples as part of its constitution. Rugby is the most popular sport in Papua New Guinea, while rugby union is the national sport of New Zealand, Samoa, Fiji, and Tonga. Every 4 years, the Festival of Pacific Arts promotes a wide range of Pacific-wide culture manifestation with a focus on traditional song and dance. There are another examples of culture of this region, a blend of cultures. An Aborigine dressed in Western style attire reflects a fusion of civilizations. Aborigines are estimated to have arrived in Australia 40,000 years ago from Asia. Many Aborigines nowadays are working to keep their ancient customs alive while living in the contemporary world. Next is thatched house. On an island in Samoa, thatched houses, known as fields, sit beneath palm trees. The open sides of the residences allow mild seaside breezes to pass through. Rain or harsh sun can be kept out by lowering palm leaf blinds. For Mirror in the Waters, the Sydney Opera House shines as darkness descends. Mirror in the waters of Sydney Harbour. The white shells that make up the roof of the building resemble billowing sails, a fitting tribute to Australia's busiest seaport. And lastly, bundle against the cold. Scientists in Antarctica bundle themselves against the cold to put equipment into a waiting helicopter. Antarctica is a continent dedicated nearly entirely to scientific exploration and research. Many countries have research stations here, including the United States. That's all from me. Next, I will pass to Ashikin to continue our presentation.
Alright, next, my name is Ashikin and I'll be presenting the current issues. Alright, there has been a lot of buzz in Australia recently since it has verified its first case of monkeypox in Victoria, joining a growing list of countries impacted by the rare tropical virus. As we all know, monkeypox is an uncommon illness caused by infection with the monkeypox virus. Monkeypox produces smallpox-like skin lesions, but symptoms are usually milder than those of smallpox. Handling bushmeat, an animal bite or scrape, bodily fluids, contaminated objects, or intimate contact with an infected human can all transmit monkeypox. For more information, it has been determined that the virus was transmitted by a traveller in his 30s who recently returned from Britain. However, Australian health officials have taken precautions to detect and handle any monkeypox cases, including sending out clinical alerts to hospitals and doctors. Moreover, did you guys know that in New Zealand, they unveiled new trade sanctions against Russia because of ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine? The government of New Zealand has imposed a 35% tax on all Russian imports as well as various export restrictions. In other words, New Zealand's direct trade exposure to Russia is minimal. Exports to Russia have recently been interrupted. In 2021, export to Russia accounted for only 0.4% of total goods export, with butter accounting for half of it, while imports from Russia were largely crude oil. Furthermore, Fonterra, New Zealand's largest dairy exporter, has announced its voluntary exit from the Russian market. New Zealand will also block the export of industrial items such as ICT equipment and engines under the Russia Sanctions Act, delivering a clear message that it will neither fund or support Russia's war machine. For further information, these tariff rises are part of larger international effort to put pressure on Putin's regime. In addition to other steps previously implemented, these trade restrictions operate in combination with Ukraine and international allies to put the maximum pressure on Putin's administration to end hostilities. Last but not least, Papua New Guinea is now experiencing social instability. The discontent with the government's reaction to the 2019 coronavirus epidemic and government instability ahead of the 2022 election indicate to huge protests and riots in Papua New Guinea, where looting and rioting are common. After riots went on a spree of looting and burning, Papua New Guinea has declared a state of emergency, suspended a provincial administration, and is sending military personnel to the remote highlands to restore order. Violent unrest has taken place in highland regions with illicit small guns widely accessible. In addition, violence has often ravaged the remote interior of the resource-rich Pacific nation, with trouble and land dispute over land regional politics. And protesters in Manding, the province capital of the Southern Highlands, have set fire to plants, looted warehouses, and set fire to buildings in response to the court's inability to challenge the provincial governor's elections. Moreover, between 100 and 200 men armed with stick and gun arrived from surrounding villages in flatbed truck when they heard of the failure of the court challenge to election of a political opponent as governor. From this situation, we can see that social instability in Papua New Guinea is a very severe issue that is currently occurring in the country.
Hi, I'm Alia, and I'm the last presenter for this group. I will present the sub-region of Australia and New Zealand, the sub-Pacific islands of Oceania, and lastly, Antarctica. Okay, first, Australia and New Zealand. Australia and New Zealand are inhabited almost entirely by European people who transferred their politics, cultural traditions, and economics to the opposite side of the world. Southeast Australia. Most of Australians live in the temperate and humid southeastern coastal region from near Brisbane to the Adelaide. Northern Australia is the least populated of Australia's primary political divisions. However, most of few Aboriginal people who live in traditional ways reside here. Western Australia, the largest state in area but is mostly desert and its main settlements around Perth. New Zealand. New Zealanders, sometimes self-referred to by their nickname Cowies, take pride in the natural beauty of the country's two main islands. They even have nicknamed their country the Adventure and Adventure Sports Capital of the World. Next, the South Pacific islands of Oceania stretch from Papua New Guinea to hundreds of tiny islands with few inhabitants positioned thousands of kilometers to the east. Melanesia southwestern island consists of Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Fiji, New Caledonia, and New Caledonia. Fun fact of Papua New Guinea, the western part of this island is Irian Jaya, part of Indonesia. Micronesia, now northwestern island, consists of Guam, the Northern Mariana, Nauru, Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia. Polynesia, the largest of the three groups in the terms of Asian area but the poorest in economic development, is the islands of Southern Pacific Islands, which includes Kiribati, Tuvalu, Tonga, and many more. We move on to Antarctica. 10% of Earth's land surface area larger than either Europe or Australia. Often described as continent or superlatives, Antarctica is not only the world's southernmost continent, it is also the world's highest, driest, windiest, coldest, and iciest continent. East and West Antarctica correspond roughly to the eastern and western hemispheres relative to the Greenwich meridian. Fun fact, Antarctica holds the most world's fresh water. Also, there is no Antarctic time zone. Economic activities. Australia. By the mid-1900s, Australia had a two-tier economy. The first tier depended on exports of agricultural products and mine minerals. The second tier consists of protected manufacturing and government-owned enterprise such as airlines, railroads, and docks. Australians also practice import substitution manufacturing. Australia's farm output. 2% of their agricultural land is cultivated and the remainder is devoted to livestock grazing. New Zealand's economy is primarily based on natural resources, the export of farm and forest products to Europe, and tourism. Oceania. Commercialization of inter-island trade occurred in the early post-colonial years. Some of the islands entered the world economy with sales of coconut palm products, farm, forest, and mine products. Papua New Guinea, copper and gold. New Caledonia, nickel. Nauru, phosphate. Other few islands have natural resources. Tourism in this region remains dependent on the retention of an attractive environment and political stability. Antarctica. Antarctica is not a country and so does not have an economy of its own. The ATS prevents the known deposits of coal and other minerals from being exploited. Antarctica's surrounding ocean draw fishes from all over the world's most prolific life zones. That's all from me. Thank you.